Thanks for coming to the talk. I was going to talk for 10 minutes about on some aspects of the Kuros figure. And one thing that I think is kind of interesting, there's a lot of ways to talk about, which is kind of beautiful about art, there's a lot of ways to talk about any object, and vectors into it and vectors out of it. One thing that I think about a lot is when you don't understand or don't have a relationship to how or why an object was made, if you can get a little bit of a handle on how it was made, you can understand, you get a handle on it a little bit. And the we tend to think of marble and carving marble of an artist or a studio of artists banging away at something with chisels. And the early archaic Kuroses and early sculptures were not made with chisels, but were these blocks of stone were really heavy, and they were first made maybe, at least halfway carved away in the quarry because they were too hard to move. But they weren't carved with chisels, they were carved with punches. And the sculptor or groups of sculptor, or sculptor and assistants, I don't know, would pick out a block or find a block and not hit tangentially like you do with a chisel, as you do in Renaissance sculpture, which is why you have that kind of beautiful grainy quality of a Renaissance sculpture, because a punch hitting directly at a block of stone shatters the crystalline structure. And so if you've noticed ancient Greek work, it's all very kind of chalky almost. And obviously too, it took paint and that absorbed paint. So you would go all the way around a block. The block was very important. You'd go all the way around the block, and then you'd go down a size of punch. And then you go down another size, and you'd go down another size, and then another size, and another size, and another size. So you peeled the block almost like an onion. And a kind of interesting aspect of this is the surface and the parts of the sculpture, and what that revealed in a work. Early Greek sculpture it's kind of why I think like a toenail is equal to a lip. There's sort of a democracy of parts, because you can look at a Michelangelo and there'll be a half carved block, or just a face totally perfect is emerging from a block, because they're using a different method to make it. This I find kind of interesting reflection in the work. This is a piece that I visit quite a bit whenever I'm in New York. It's known as the Manhattan Kuros. And I don't know, really, none of us can experience it as ancient Greeks experienced it. We can speculate what it was made for, what it was doing. Could have been at a temple as a votive object, donated to the temple by equivalent of a Eli Broad of the region. You might be taking a walk or traveling, and you come across a field, and there's one of the same style, so you might speculate that this is a power trajectory, that this dude who donated the one in Athens owns this field, for instance. But we don't know. A friend of mine who years ago worked at the Getty said they used to, before the Getty was a big deal, drag the Getty's Kuros, the fake, outside to be able to see it in the light of how they were beheld then. I'm totally fascinated by this this figure. And one reason, again, why it may have been made and what its original purpose has fallen away. you know, over the years or now other purposes and other ways of looking at it are brought to it, and that interests me quite a bit. And so I like to think about objects, and to me, the Kuros and some other work that I like it is so contemporary, and and one reason it's contemporary is simply because we can still see it. It hasn't fallen away as you know, debris. We still read it, and I find that interesting. How do I read it? I am very interested in the surface, and the Kuros figure I can project myself into. 75 years later, sculpture has become so idealized and so mathematical and so perfect, it's about another thing. I can no longer project into it. But what do I mean by project into it? And I look at the Kuros, I look at and think about a relationship of parts, almost as the figure as a manifold. And what is interesting about that? What's interesting to me is I feel sometimes that I myself are a bunch of parts. Aspects of me, as in the Kuros, are totally stylized, and that's how I'm able to stand here. So I can fake it. You know, I know how to go to a party, sort of. You know, I can, you know, through film and movies, I've learned how to hold a glass of wine and talk to a girl. You know, and this is a stylization. And there's aspect of the Kuros that I project as very stylized. I project it, I see that in myself, in a sense, the hair. These different aspects. There's other parts of it that are totally naturalistic. There's parts of me that I can't hide, that, you know, maybe the way I stand or the way I am or the way I lie, or, you know, what comes out from a naturalization of me. But, you know, somehow the making of the Kuros, the carving of it, whatever its original intents were, a meaning machine in a sense. I don't mean to really call art a machine, because it isn't. It's not a one-way equation, it's a two-way equation, but it got turned on. And it's been, for me, at least the way I see it, busy ever since, generating aspects of meaning, not in any way saying that this is the way the ancients saw this piece through a kind of projection. It's the way I see it now. It's my engagement with it. It's just like the feet, to me, have always been, you know, very naturalistic. Its relationship to its block is super interesting, I think. You have to remember, as the scholar and historian Richard Neer told me once, he said, you have to remember that these figures were the only smooth things in a very rough world. I mean, the whole world was, you know, rutted and pitted, and, you know, and you had this figure. It was like, and maybe it's not the way one would have thought about it then, and it makes me wonder, and I like to look at things today that have that equivalence. This is a very, in its own way, rough world. And it's interesting for me to try to look for an equivalent to a smooth thing. I find in the kind of panoima, if I want to refer to the balloon dog, for instance, like look at the testicles on this thing. I mean, they're just, but that's not, I mean, I'm holding them and talking about them separately, but they're in very much a relationship to the entire sculpture, working. There's a, you know, why is the Kuros smiling? You know, it was an attempt to animate it. And that's interesting to know, you know, what is the Kuros doing? It's stepping forward. It's a young man becoming a man? Is it the ancient going into the classical? Is it, you know, me moving forward You know, but it's moving from a position into space. I talked about the smile, this attempt to kind of animate the figure, the testicles, you know, being, you know, not swollen, but, you know, having this quality. But as you move through it, you know, of course, you notice that arms have to be, you know, carved, not broken away from the block itself, you know, or they would, you know, fall off. So you notice the kind of, oh, I didn't get there yet. Yeah, there you go. How that was handled. But it's also interesting to see if you go here, you know, it's part of the block, but the artist has squeezed that. There's no need to, but it's squeezed slightly. So almost like a water balloon. I'm exaggerating to make my point, but that form is beginning to squeeze out. It has kind of, it's a work, has a temporal dimension, has a spatial dimension, and how it reads in a space, not the space it was made to be put in, but it also has kind of tumbled into time. It has been, like I said, you know, still working today, which I find, as a contemporary object, I find really amazing. Are useful for me. And I wanted to talk about this grave stele of this girl, oops, I went too far, holding a bird. Here I can kind of talk quickly a little bit, maybe about maybe this makes more sense for the theme of the show. I find this a extraordinary piece. It's another piece I visit a lot. And I'll go through and then back up a little bit. So what you see, it's a relief. And it works so powerfully to me as a relief today because of the three-dimensional quality of it is given way only here at the mouth of the girl kissing the bird. And so you have this incredibly, to me, philosophical notion about space. And again, I want to be really clear. I'm not saying the sculptors at this time were thinking Einsteinian ideas about space or 20th century poetic ideas about space. It was put in there artistically. You know, it was doing something, and it's in a, I think one of the powerful reasons it works is because it's in relationship to the rendition of space as the relief. And then here, at this moment of the space where she's kissing the bird, of breath, of life, of bird song, that flowing of space around there, to me, is incredibly philosophical. It's a philosophical, almost physics type of space. Where if you look at, I was looking at a Bernini bust of, and it's Bernini and to me Koons are very similar, as they're not so much philosophical but demonic in a way, transformative. You look at the balloon dog, the ripple, and it's an elastic stretch. No, it's stainless steel, it's elastic. You look at a Bernini, it's a hanging button from a thread. No, it's marble, it's a button. And it's a transformation of material to substance that kind of hooks us and pulls us in. If you look at a Bernini curl of hair, there can be a passage in a Bernini, but it's not a philosophical passage. It's not a by that I mean it's not a, for me anyway, it's not a charged almost philosophical space, the way this little gentle space at the mouth and the bird's beak is. And I think for me, it's aspects of that the making can be so powerful, the sculpturalness of the work, the idea, we don't know who the girl was, we don't know, we can speculate about the class, et cetera, the purposes, but I'm not an ancient Greek, but that's all fallen away. And the work is still working, and still working, in my mind, in an extremely contemporary way. So that's my presentation. Thank you.